And this done, Jem Device, shouting to Sparshot to look out, flung one coil of rope across the river, where it was caught with much dexterity by the beadle. The assemblage then spread out on the bank, while Jem, taking the poor young woman in his arms, who neither spoke nor struggled, but held her breath tightly, approached the river. "Dunna drown her, Jem," said Jennet, who had turned very pale. "Be quiet, wench," rejoined Jem, gruffly. And without bestowing further attention upon her, he let down his burden carefully into the water, and this achieved, he called out to the beadle, who drew her slowly towards him, while Jem guided her with the other rope. The crowd watched the experiment for a few moments in profound silence, but as the poor young woman, who had now reached the centre of the stream, still floated, being supported either by the tension of the cords or by her woollen apparel, a loud shout was raised that she could not sink, and was therefore an undeniable witch. "Steady, lads, steady a moment," cried Potts, enchanted with the success of the experiment. "Leave her where she is, that her buoyancy may be fully attested. You know, masters," he cried, with a loud voice, "the meaning of this water ordeal. Our sovereign lord and master the king, in his wisdom, hath graciously vouchsafed to explain the matter thus. Water, he saith, shall refuse to receive them, meaning witches, of course, in her bosom, that hath shaken off their sacred water of baptism, and wilfully refused the benefit thereof. It is manifest, you see, that this diabolical young woman hath renounced her baptism, for the water rejecteth her. Non potest mergi, as Pliny saith. She floats like a cork, or as if the clear water of the Calder had suddenly become like the slab salt waves of the Dead Sea, in which nothing can sink. You behold the marvel with your own eyes, my masters." "Ay, ay," returned Baggiley and several others. "Hoo be a witch for sartin," cried Jem Device. But as he spoke, chancing slightly to slacken the rope, the tension of which maintained the equilibrium of the body, the poor woman instantly sank. A groan, as much of disappointment as sympathy, broke from the spectators, but none attempted to aid her, and on seeing her sink, Jem abandoned the rope altogether. But assistance was at hand. Two persons rushed quickly and furiously to the spot. They were Richard and Nicholas Assheton. The iron bar had at length yielded to their efforts, and the first use they made of their freedom was to hurry to the river. A glance showed them what had occurred, and the younger Assheton, unhesitatingly plunging into the water, seized the rope dropped by Jem, and calling to the beadle to let go his hold, dragged forth the poor half drowned young woman, and placed her on the bank, hewing asunder the cords that bound her hands and feet with his sword. But though still sensible, Nance was so much exhausted by the shock she had undergone, and her muscles were so severely strained by the painful and unnatural posture to which she had been compelled, that she was wholly unable to move. Her thumbs were blackened and swollen, and the cords had cut in the flesh, while blood trickled down from the puncture in her breast. Fixing a look of inexpressible gratitude upon her preserver, she made an effort to speak, but the exertion was too great. Violent hysterical sobbing came on, and her senses soon after forsook her. Richard called loudly for assistance, and the sentiments of the most humane part of the crowd having undergone a change since the failure of the ordeal, some females came forward and took steps for her restoration. Sensibility having returned, a cloak was wrapped around her, and she was conveyed to a neighbouring cottage and put to bed, where her stiffened limbs were chafed and warm drinks administered, and it began to be hoped that no serious consequences would ensue. Meanwhile, a catastrophe had well nigh occurred in another quarter. With eyes flashing with fury, Nicholas Assheton pushed aside the crowd, and made his way to the bank whereupon Master Potts stood. Not liking his looks, the little attorney would have taken to his heels, but finding escape impossible, he called upon Baggiley to protect him. But he was instantly in the forcible grip of the squire, who shouted "I'll teach you, mongrel hound, to play tricks with gentlemen." "Master Nicholas," cried the terrified and half strangled attorney. "My very good sir, I entreat you to let me alone. This is a breach of the King's peace, sir. Assault and battery under aggravated circumstances, and punishable with ignominious corporal penalties, besides fine and imprisonment, sir. I take you to witness the assault, Master Baggiley. I shall bring my action. Then you shall have something to bring your action for, rascal," cried Nicholas. And seizing the attorney by the nape of the neck with one hand, and the hind wings of his doublet with the other, he cast him to a considerable distance into the river, where he fell with a tremendous splash. "He is no wizard, at any event," laughed Nicholas, as Potts went down like a lump of lead. But the attorney was not born to be drowned, at least at this period of his career. On rising to the surface, a few seconds after his immersion, he roared lustily for help, but would infallibly have been carried over the weir, if Jem Device had not flung him the rope, now disengaged from Nance Redferne, and which he succeeded in catching. In this way he was dragged out, and as decrepit up the bank, with the wet pouring from his apparel, which now clung tightly to his lathy limbs, he was greeted by the jeers of Nicholas. "How like you the water ordeal, eh, Master Attorney? No occasion for a second trial, I think. If Jem Device had known his own interest, he would have left you to fatten the colder eels. But he will find it out in time." "You will find it out too, Master Nicholas," rejoined Potts, clapping on his wet cap. "Take me to the Dragon quickly, good fellow," he added to Jem Device, "and I will recompense thee for thy pains, as well as for the service thou hast just rendered me. I shall have rheumatism in my joints, pains in my loins, and rheum in my head. Oh dear! oh dear!" "In which case you will not be able to pay Mother Demdike your purposed visit to morrow," jeered Nicholas. "You forgot you were to arrest her, and bring her before a magistrate." "Thy arm, good fellow, thy arm," said Potts to Jem Device. "To the fiend with thee," cried Jem, shaking him off roughly. "The squire's reet. Would he had let thee drown?" "What, have you changed your mind already, Jem?" cried Nicholas, in a taunting tone. "You'll have your grandmother's thanks for the service you've rendered her, lad." "For the matter of two pins, I'd pitch him in again," growled Jem, eyeing the attorney askance. "No, no, Jem," observed Nicholas. "Things must take their course. What's done is done. But if Master Potts be wise, he'll take himself out of court without delay." "You'll be glad to get me out of court one of these days, squire," muttered Potts; "and so will you too, Master James Device. A day of reckoning will come for both heavy reckoning. Oh! oh!" he added, shivering, "how my teeth chatter." "Make what haste you can to the Dragon," cried the good natured squire. "Get your clothes dried, and bid John Law brew you a bottle of strong sack. Swallow it scalding hot, and you'll never look behind you." "Nor before me either," retorted Potts. "Scalding sack! This bloodthirsty squire has a new design upon my life." "And go with it to the Dragon, Mister," said Baggiley. "Lean on me." "Thank ye, friend," replied Potts, taking his arm. "A word at parting, Master Nicholas. This is not the only discovery of witchcraft I have made. I have another case, somewhat nearer home. Ha!" With this he hobbled off in the direction of the alehouse, his steps being traceable along the dusty road, like the course of a watering cart. "I'll go after him," growled Jem. "No, you won't, lad," rejoined Nicholas; "and if you'll take my advice, you'll get out of Whalley as fast as you can. You'll be safer on the heath of Pendle than here, when Sir Ralph and Master Roger Nowell come to know what's taken place. And mind this, Sarah, the hounds will be out in the forest to morrow. Do you heed?" Jem growled something in reply, and seizing his little sister's hand, strode off with her towards his mother's dwelling, uttering not a word by the way. Having seen Nance Redferne conveyed to the cottage, as before mentioned, Richard Assheton, regardless of the wet state of his own apparel, now joined his cousin the squire, and they walked to the abbey together, conversing on what had taken place, while the crowd dispersed, some returning to the bowers in the churchyard, and others to the green, their merriment in nowise damped by the recent occurrences, which they looked upon as part of the day's sport. As some of them passed by, laughing, singing, and dancing, Richard Assheton remarked, "I can scarcely believe these to be the same people I so lately saw in the churchyard. They then seemed totally devoid of humanity." "Pshaw! they're human enough,"